Hey guys. This is part 14 of What If Naruto is hiding her identity, and secretly a girl. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 67, Cheers and Tears. He knew he was being somewhat pathetic. It hadn't even been 3 days since Naruto had left, and he missed her more than he thought possible. Unfortunately, he knew he had to get his mind on the important matter of the war. Every able body in the village above Genin had moved out to meet with the forces from the other villages. The number of ninjas were overwhelming, and yet Shikamaru couldn't help but wonder, would this be enough? Madara was a legend, a warrior with only one equal, the first Hokage. A fighter of their caliber had not been seen since their death. Except, that wasn't entirely true. Shikamaru thought about the little blonde everyone saw as a screw-up, then he thought about the powerhouse that had not only taken on all 6 pains when even the top jonins had trouble taking on one, but had also been able to move the collateral that was the 9 tails away from the villagers. If Naruto could gain control over the power of the 9 tails, she could be on par with Madara, though there was no knowing for certain. There was also the added risk of sending one of the 2 people he needed straight at him. Not to mention the woman Shikamaru loved. There was no way he was uttering a word of his suspicions about Naruto's true strength to anyone. Instead of dwelling on those thoughts, he tried to hope that there were some talented fighters from the other villagers that he didn't know about, and sheer numbers would have an effect over Madara and any forces he had. That was another big issue. There was no way the nearly depleted Akatsuki could have been the only form of an army that Madara had. Even as powerful as the man was, he couldn't be so arrogant to fight alone. So, who were making up his forces? He scanned the assembled fighters, wondering if there was someone secretly strong enough to at least hold out against Madara. He was so focused on studying the swarm of people in front of him that he didn't notice anyone walk up behind him until they slammed their hands into his shoulders painfully. With the sound of laughter ringing in his ears, he spun around to glare at the offending party. He ended up scoffing and rolling his eyes when he saw Kankuro grinning at him. "You're a pain." "Sorry," Kankuro chuckled. "Couldn't help myself." Reaching out, Shikamaru quickly ran his finger through one of the lines of war paint on the other man's face. He smirked at Kankuro's indignant squawk. "Well, there goes 2 hours in front of the mirror," declared Temari, coming to stand beside her brother. "We saw you getting lost in your own mind and thought we'd save you." "Thanks. Though a gentler route would have been nicer," he joked, rubbing his shoulder with a pointed look at Kankuro, who just shot him an amused grin. With a sigh, he sobered up. "So, what do you think our chances are?" "Nope," Temari said, shaking her head viciously. "Don't think about the odds. Honestly, think about all our major fights. So often it seems like the battle is against us, and we win, and then I know I've been in battles I thought I could easily win, and I didn't. Hell, when the sand invaded the leaf we thought we had it in the bag," Kankuro admitted. "When Gaara lost control I thought your friends would be dead for sure. Then I found Naruto and Gaara in the same clearing, Gaara unconscious and Naruto still having enough strength to finish him if she needed to. You can't predict these things. And yes, I know Naruto is a girl." "But do you really know?" Shikamaru asked, throwing his head back with laughter when Kankuro stomped his foot in frustration. "Yes." Temari suddenly grabbed Shikamaru's head, pushing it to the side and yanking down the collar of his turtleneck. She gave a dramatic gasp whilst Kankuro, having seen what his sister exposed, started fanning himself as though he saw something scandalous that made him feel faint. Shikamaru smacked Temari's hands away and pulled his collar back into place, but it was too late. He could feel his face reddening as the 2 siblings continued to laugh and act like Shikamaru was debaucherous. Yeah, very funny," he grumbled. He was certain Naruto had done something to the hickey to ensure it took longer to fade, though he did find comfort with the knowledge of it being there to mark his skin. "So you found some courage and admitted you're pathetically in love with Naruto then?" Shikamaru looked straight at Temari, face blank though still a little red. "Yep." Before the siblings could say any more, there was a call to assemble. From then on, Shikamaru felt like he was in a whirlwind. The forces of all 5 ninja villages had been combined and then split back into 5 groups to do with specialties. From there, people were assembled into squads. He was both surprised and not surprised that he was given the captaincy of one such team, as well as being made second in command of the 4th Company, under Gaara. He was aware that he had a marked talent for strategy, but he still found it difficult to believe he was ready to lead a squadron or company in this war. There was a tangle of fear as he remembered the first time he led a team. With a deep breath, he told himself that he had changed, grown stronger and smarter, since then. Releasing the breath, he told his subordinates to move out. As he led his squad away from the courtyard they had gathered in to hear Gaara, he caught Ino's eye. The woman gave him a tight smile, one Shikamaru struggled to return. He wanted to say something to her, but he had never been particularly articulate, and that wasn't going to suddenly change. Whilst Ino went to the 5th Company, he and Choji were sent to the 4th Company, stationed in the desert. They were going to be under Gaara's command, Choji being part of the close-range squad and the overall long-range unit. Although it was logical to have Ino in the support formation, he found it unsettling to have her out of sight. They were a team after all. The entire time he worked with the other soldiers, he felt like he was waiting for the inevitable moment. Finally it came. Ino, Choji, and himself all converged. Although their abilities were all very different, they were still the latest generation of Ino Shikacho, and there was a reason that the 3 clans always placed their heirs in a team together. As a unit, they were near unstoppable. Separately, their clan abilities were formidable, but together they were almost a flawless attack. The fact that they weren't just part of the reinforcements, but purposely selected for the battle spoke volumes about their enemy. Their team was being called in for one person. Even with so many people bulking up the forces on the beach, they were still needed. His father had admitted to him that even the Reikage was afraid of the man named Kinkaku. When his father explained the items that would be on the battlefield, Shikamaru instantly started planning for how to best use them. When his father contacted them again to check if they had a plan already, Shikamaru made sure to ask a few last questions to ensure that Ino would be safe if they enacted his strategy. Even with a plan, the idea of going up against a man who had eaten up part of the Ninetales was terrifying. Shikamaru's father hadn't shied away from the fact that a small part of the reason they were called in was because of their familiarity with the Ninetales' powers through times that Naruto had lost control. Whilst they had never fought Naruto on those occasions, they had been able to observe how her fighting style was affected, as was her strength and abilities. The man they faced, however, was much different from Naruto. Kinkaku was in complete control of himself as he used the Ninetales chakra to fight the allied forces. The cloak didn't appear to cause him any pain, unlike when it burned Naruto's flesh away. Though, as someone reincarnated, it was unclear if Kinkaku had skin. Shikamaru stopped with his 2 teammates upon arriving on the edge of the battlefield. They were ahead of the rest of the reinforcements, and were able to take the time to observe the devastation. One thing quickly became clear to all 3 of them. This is what Naruto is capable of if she stopped fighting the Ninetales. Ino gasped, staring at the decimated cliff face with horror. No, she could do a lot more. Kinkaku only has a drop of the chakra Naruto has. Choji scanned the area, probably looking for his father. Except if Naruto accessed the chakra like Kinkaku, she would be in control. She would never do this, Shikamaru reminded them sharply. The 2 seemed to realize what they had insinuated and gave Shikamaru an apologetic look. He knew they didn't mean it, but he couldn't have them thinking such things if Naruto joined the war. Because if she joined, it would be with the full strength of the Ninetales. Taking in the scene again, he realized what that truly meant. He knew that Naruto and the Jinchuriki for the 8 Tails could change the tide of the war. They could easily destroy the enemy's line. That also meant that if the enemy was able to access the power of the tailed beasts they already had, the allied forces were in a lot of trouble. It was only a miracle that the Akatsuki hadn't been able to capture the Ninetales, the greatest attacker. Team Asuma shared a hard look before descending on the battlefield. The reinforcements had finally caught them and were only a step behind them. Sorry we're late, Ino called to the ninjas fighting Kinkaku. So that's him. Shikamaru looked closely over the imposing man covered in the unfortunately familiar red Ninetales cloak. The slow, predatory movements were intimidating, but Naruto's unpredictable viciousness when she had the cloak was much more terrifying. In his mind he saw the look Naruto got on her face at times, the calm, slow flickering of her eyes, the slight cock of her head. Over time Shikamaru had realized that was her evaluating situations and people down to chakra signals. Shikamaru had found the expression highly appealing, but it was only now that he thought of what Naruto could do with that talent once she had almost unlimited power behind her. The thought didn't make the look any less enjoyable to him. How could he do all of this? Choji wondered out loud, looking over the scene again now that they were closer. Shikamaru almost jumped when a resounding cheer rang through. He looked out at the corner of his eye to spy where some of the sound came from, only to find the first company clapping and cheering for not only the reinforcements, but the Ino Shikacho that they had been waiting for. So do you get the feeling that there's a lot of hope riding on us now? He found it hard to swallow around his dry mouth. That's the kind of people we've become? It's making me kinda nervous though, Choji said, always being the one willing to admit his true feelings. Well, I guess we're just gonna have to live up to their expectation. Ino pulled her shoulders back. For a moment, Shikamaru could see the type of woman she would have become if Naruto had stayed her sister. Ino had a lot of strength, and yet she often let the idea of how she was meant to behave get in the way of that. Sometimes it was like she thought she had to choose between being a female and being a ninja. If she had had Naruto's influence in regard to not caring for gender norms, Ino's strength would probably show itself more often. Next moment a voice in the crowd sounded out. Hey, wait, they're just the kids. Not the real Ino Shikacho. The cheers turned to groans. Shikamaru put a hand to his head, sighing. Yeah, kinda figured they would say something like that. Me too. Ino was yet again the one to keep the fight in them. Come on now, we're gonna start a legend of our very own. So, let's get going, guys. Both men agreed with her. The forces used paper bombs to create a smoke cover, allowing Choji to charge in inhuman boulder form. Kinkaku fought against the strength coming at him and threw Choji over his head. By then it was too late. Shikamaru had Kinkaku in his shadow. The moment the man realized, he tried to fight against it. Shikamaru had been assaulted by the Ninetales chakra before. This was nothing like it. Perhaps it was because Naruto's warm, energetic chakra was mingling with the chaotic burn, but this was different. It wasn't even like when he felt the Ninetales take over Naruto years before during her fight with Sasuke. Back then it had felt like an intense heat, singeing his face raw even from a great distance. This felt more like a blunt punch, which was appropriate given that Kinkaku literally punched at where the shadow held him to release himself. It left Shikamaru winded and shaking off the dull throb that beat through his body. Kinkaku shot out one of his tails. Shikamaru knew it didn't matter, but his heart gave a pain thump at the sight of it. Ino had locked in on Kinkaku, and the moment Shikamaru's shadow broke, she transferred. The tail stopped an inch from Shikamaru's face. Now that's good timing, Shikamaru shot over his shoulder at Ino. He caught Ino as her consciousness transferred into Kinkaku, making the dead man respond to his own name and be sucked into the waiting gourd. Even though he had checked to make sure Ino wouldn't be taken with him, Shikamaru still stared at her unmoving body in fear. It only took moments for her to wake up, giving him a relieved smile. After Ino had found her feet, Shikamaru instantly made his way towards where Choji landed. The bigger man was waterlogged but otherwise fine. With the defeat of the Gold and Silver Brothers, the troops appeared to gain a new set of energy. The change in their perception of the younger Ino Shikacho was astounding and made Shikamaru need a breath. He wondered for a moment if Naruto felt like this, but at a more powerful level, when the village cheered for her after her fight with Pain. After the moment he took for himself, he surveyed the surrounding area, looking for the next imposing enemy. It wasn't difficult for him to locate one. A man that looked familiar even from a distance was holding a ninja up by the neck. The man before them opened his mouth and a gruff, uncaring voice spoke. Long time, no see, Ino Shikacho. If I remember correctly, you're Kakazu. We took the Keen. The Gold Shoji General is ours, and we know the moves of Kakuzu the Bishop good, so we'll attack. Just looking at the man made Shikamaru think of the last time he saw him. He shivered, the cold despair of loss creeping up his spine. the brat who uses shadows. You being here only means one thing. You must have taken down Haydn. Did he get his head chopped off again whilst he was praying? Or since he's not here, does that mean he's still out there somewhere? Who even cares if he's dead or alive? Ino snapped. Shikamaru bit back a growl at the mention of Haydn. If they lost, how long would it take for Kakuzu to track Haydn down? Shikamaru had sworn that the murderer of Asuma-sensei would never breathe air, never walk the earth again. He couldn't fail that now. So I'm on defense with no rook and my gold and silver generals are taken. Kakazu, with terrifying casualty, reached into the chest of the dead ninja he still had suspended, taking the man's heart. And that makes 5. Wait, that's right, Ino exclaimed as they all tried not to watch the ally corpse drop. If he's got 5 hearts now, we've got to stop him 5 times. Shikamaru swore silently before he confirmed Ino's statement. Kakausa put the heart in his chest. I think it's time to start the game in kind. He released the 4 masked forms from his back. Who, by the way, we've got our own pieces taken from your side too. Don't you want to know who they are? He paused only long enough for Shikamaru to raise an eyebrow and for Choji to gulp. Lady Tsunade's love, Don Kato, and also. Fire erupted on one of the side cliffs, drawing their attention. Within the flames, Shikamaru saw a familiar figure that he prayed was a trick of the light. Your former teacher, son of the 3rd Hokage, Asuma Soritobi. Asuma-sensei, Choji whimpered as they all gasped. So, I guess you're not the only ones who's managed to take your own opponent's game pieces. And there are still others yet remaining. It's ironic, huh? Kakuzu taunted. Why you? Shikamaru growled, spying Choza battling who Shikamaru assumed was Don. Even from a distance he could see that Don was begging Choza for something. Unfortunately, Kakaza sent his masked forms to break up the allied ranks in that fight. Before Shikamaru or his teammates could react, Izumo and Kotetsu attacked Kakuzu from behind, cutting through his torso with their double-ended chained scythe. We still owe you one, hissed Kotetsu. Hope you haven't forgotten, you stringy mess. Sorry, but I don't remember everyone who can't make me money. No doubt Kakuzu thought that would bother the 2 men. They were obviously older than Ino Shikacho, and yet the younger team were worth a bounty to their enemies. However, the 2 gate guards had no love for notoriety. No doubt, though, they were going to make Kakuzu regret not knowing them after the ill-fated mission. Before Shikamaru, Ino, and Choji could fulfill their request to help them seal Kakuzu away, Shikaku spoke up in their minds. His orders made Shikamaru's insides turn heavy, sitting uncomfortably in his gut. They had to fight Asuma-sensei. It made sense, Shikamaru knew that. Asuma was a powerful shinobi who now had unlimited chakra, stamina, and endurance. The fact that they knew his fighting style, his hand signs, the way he thought gave them an invaluable advantage. And yet, Shikamaru looked to his side, noticing the horror coating Ino's expression. He didn't need to look at Choji. The gentleman had always had trouble fighting his friends in a sparring match. This time, they had to take out not only a friend but their beloved teacher, someone who had a pinnacle hand in shaping who they were. The sounds of the surrounding fight pressed in on his ears. As long as Asuma-sensei stood, that sound wouldn't stop. More allies would fall, more men and women wouldn't return to their families, more people would feel what Shikamaru had felt at the loss of Asuma-sensei, or would feel the pain that Kurenai-sensei suffered. If they didn't stop their teacher quickly, his legacy would change from dearly missed shinobi and man who died protecting his comrades to an enemy, perhaps one that took out his own students. They couldn't do that. Asuma-sensei deserved better. His daughter deserved better. Never was she to hear how her father was one of their most powerful enemies. If Shikamaru had to face the unthinkable to stop that, so be it. Ino must have found her own resolve since she helped Choji to pull his shoulders back and prepare for battle. The hand she put on Shikamaru's back gave him the last bit of strength he needed to move. They ran in the direction of the familiar figure. Asuma-sensei was fighting 3 ninjas, one who wore the Chunin vest of the leaf. Even from a distance, Shikamaru saw the hand signs for one of Asuma-sensei's signature moves. They were too far away to warn his opponents. The ash cloud enveloped the three, and seconds later the ash burst into a bright flame that singed the very air around it, leaving a heatwave in its wake and a thick cloud of dust. Shikamaru stopped at the edge of the cloud with Ino and Choji on either side of him. The smell of burning flesh threatened to choke him. He took shallow breaths, trying to keep the smell and the smoke out of his nose. All too quickly the smoke dissipated and they all laid eyes on Asuma-sensei. "It's you three," Asuma-sensei gasped. The warm brown of his eyes was lost amongst the pit black that had engulfed the once white areas. Part of Shikamaru was thankful for the smoke that stopped any chance of Shikamaru catching a whiff of Asuma's scent that was always a mixture of cigarettes and bonfire. And if it turned out that he didn't smell like that, but of decay of death, Shikamaru wasn't sure he would be able to function long enough to fight. His knees felt wobbly at hearing the lilted rumble of his mentor's voice. "We're all prepared for the inevitable. So, Sensei, I sure hope you're prepared for it as well," Shikamaru warned, the words fighting around the lump in his throat. "Choji, Shikamaru, Ino, all of you have become fine shinobi." Such simple, yet powerful words reduced all three Chunin to tears. And yet they fought to standing strong, knowing there was no way out of what they had to do. "Asuma, it's all thanks to you," Shikamaru promised. The man gave him a soft smile, staring into his eyes. Next moment, that smile turned into an almost terrifying grin. "Please tell me you finally told Naruto you love her." "Sensei!" Shikamaru yelped, looking around hastily to make sure none of the enemy was within earshot. "What?" whined the dazed man, his body sagging. "I died before I got to see if you two ended up together. I've been trying to help you get together since you were 12. It was frustrating. Try waiting since we were about 10, Choji piped in with a wet chuckle before sniffling quietly. "We're seriously talking about this now," Shikamaru snapped. "When else? I'm dead." Asuma-sensei gave a small bounce like an excited child. "But seriously, did you ever tell her? What did she say?" "Wait. I didn't just out her as a girl to Choji and Ino, did I?" "No, you didn't," Ino assured with a small smile. "And I saw a hickey on Shikamaru's neck." Shikamaru snapped around to glare at the blonde. "What the hell, Ino?" "What?" she asked with fake innocence. "Am I wrong about what was on your neck? Or did Naruto not give you it? If so, I have questions since she has been living with you since the village was attacked." "You live with me too?" Shikamaru reminded, his voice raising an octave or two in pitch. The smile Ino gave him was terrifying. "But I haven't been sleeping in your room." "Yes," Asuma-sensei cheered, arms raised in triumph. Red-faced, the Nara spluttered, "Are you serious, sensei? And it's not Ino makes it sound like, will you stop celebrating?" "No!" Asuma-sensei cackled, doing a rather embarrassing jig. "And are you sure it's not like how I suggested?" Ino asked with a sordid smile. His face burned hotter, and his mouth acted like a fish. Eventually, he settled for the Nara grunt. Asuma-sensei finally calmed down. "You two are good for each other. I've always thought that. Take care of each other." "Thanks, sensei, and we will." Shikamaru gave the man a sad smile. "Haven't forgiven you for tricking me into a date with Naruto, though." The man laughed before they charged him. Ino and Choji broke off, moving to attack from the sides. "Show me what you've got, Ino Shikacho." Ino and Choji attacked at the same time, trying to split his attention between them before Shikamaru came through the middle. Asuma-sensei used a substitution, making his students retreat before it exploded. Choji stumbled and fell, clearly distracted. "Shikamaru, use your shadow whips and lead me over to Choji," Asuma-sensei advised. "Already on it," Shikamaru admitted. He saw the flicker of pride on his teacher's face before the shadows reached out, hurting the reincarnated man to the right. If Asuma-sensei had tried to go left, he would have been met with Ino's mind jutsu. Instead, he went towards Choji, who met him with an expanded fist. Or at least he was meant to. "What are you doing, Choji?" Asuma-sensei yelled from where he knelt in front of Choji's massive fist. The relieved expression he had worn upon seeing he was trapped had morphed into anger. "Snap out of it," Shikamaru added. "We all prepared ourselves for this." I'm sorry. This is way too much for me. I can't do it. I can't take our sensei down. I just can't. Tears began to run down Choji's round face. Shikamaru had to look away. He was barely keeping himself together. He was logical. He had to be. It was everything in this moment. Ignoring the lump that was growing and cutting off his air more with every moment, the genius watched his teacher dodge around Choji's fist, kicking him clean off his feet. The Jonin yelled a warning about his next attack before performing terrifyingly familiar hand signs. Shadows reached out to him to try and trap him, but he sidestepped, showing how well he knew his students. Seconds after Asuma-sensei's wind-style dust storm jutsu started, Ino tackled Choji, both of them landing hard against the cliff wall. Shikamaru moved to cover them if Asuma-sensei tried to attack whilst they recovered. Why? Why does it all have to end up like this? Choji sobbed. It's too late to complain about it now. We agreed to take Asuma-sensei down, remember? Shikamaru snapped. He was struggling to draw breath. The lump was pressing so heavily that his jaw ached, and his eyes stung, but he forced them to stay dry. Listening to how Choji's voice wavered, watching the desperation flicker over Asuma-sensei's face, and hearing the hitch in Ino's breaths, all of them were too much. He needed Choji at his side, like always. What's with the long face, Choji? I'm an enemy now. Accept it. You don't need to hold back. I'm already dead, Asuma-sensei snarled. Yeah, I know. I know that, but still. Even back then, sensei, Asuma-sensei said that it was okay, that this is the way I am. Shikamaru saw Asuma-sensei's face harden. Shikamaru had no doubt that this whole situation was hard on him too. If they didn't take him down, their failure would put Kurenai-sensei and their child in danger. That's enough. Choji, listen up. I know you're a truly kind person, but right now taking me down is the kindest thing you can do. This is the time for you to transform your kindness into strength. Now is the time, Choji. Please! Stop me! After a beat, he realized that Choji still needed one last push. Snap out of it, fatso! Take me down! That one insult was enough for Choji to enter the fight again. A part of Shikamaru, a section he was ashamed of, wished that hadn't been enough, that Choji still refused to fight. He knew they had to take Asuma-sensei out, that it was the best thing for everyone, but Shikamaru almost screamed in frustration when Choji yet again stopped his punch before it connected. Using one of Asuma-sensei's own daggers, he tried for a surprise attack. It failed and unfortunately set their teacher into attack. It took Shikamaru a moment to realize that Choji had not defended himself from their teacher's assault. Ino had instead thought incredibly quickly and transferred her consciousness into Choji, leaving herself vulnerable to a white Setsu. Using his shadow, he maneuvered Ino's body into kicking the opponent. Focusing on protecting Ino's body and keeping an eye on the surrounding battles, Shikamaru had to trust that Ino would help Choji through his inability to fight. She would have to work fast though, since although she knew Choji's fighting style, she didn't know how to use his jutsus and wouldn't be able to use his body as well as Choji could. This became painfully clear when Asuma-sensei used his burning ash. Shikamaru's eyes stung as he tried to see his two best friends in one form. Blinking through the tears, he made out a giant figure still sparking from the attack. For a moment he wondered if Ino had somehow performed the human boulder, or if Choji had booted her consciousness from his mind to protect her. After a moment, the smoke cleared enough for him to see Uncle Choza shielding his son and niece from their mentor's deadliest attack. Looking at Choza, having fallen to his knees from the strength of Asuma-sensei's attack, Shikamaru was reminded of the last thing his teacher had imparted to him. The king always needs to be protected, and Uncle Choza would do anything for his king. Just like they needed to do everything possible to keep Asuma-sensei's king safe. Snap out of it, Choji! Now! Shikamaru yelled. We aren't some little brats that need to be protected anymore. We're the protectors now. Do you want Asuma to murder his own child? Your idea of kindness is wrong. It was unclear if it was his screams, Uncle Choza's words, or something else, but Choji stopped, breathing heavily, appearing to be trapped in his own thoughts. Uncle Choza stayed where he was, recovering from Asuma-sensei's attack faster than many others would. Shikamaru couldn't tell if he had given up on his son finding the strength to fight this battle, or if he knew that Choji needed the time to process what to do. Suddenly, blue wings that appeared to be made of chakra sprouted from Choji's back. Shikamaru took half a step back out of surprise. He hadn't taken the chili pepper pellet. Ino gained consciousness in time to hear Shikamaru question Uncle Choza about possible side effects of Choji's transformation. The only one who didn't appear taken aback by the development was Asuma-sensei. He looked proudly at Choji. The three finally entered battle with a singular resolve. The small voice that had been thankful of Choji's hesitation silenced in Shikamaru's mind. He had sworn to protect Asuma-sensei's king, no matter how difficult that task. When Shikamaru added his shadow-stitching jutsu to Ino's mind transfer clone jutsu, that same look of pride that their beloved mentor had given Choji landed on the two of them. Asuma-sensei couldn't counter around the dancing shadow tendrils without being attacked by the zetsus in Ino's control. Shikamaru felt his throat constrict, but he pushed forward, watching the small upturn to his teacher's mouth as Choji came in with a large fist. Asuma-sensei was sent flying into the stone wall created by Kinkaku's earlier attack. Shikamaru used one of his shadows to throw Asuma-sensei's own blade towards Choji, who sent it, charged with Shikamaru's chakra, to the right of Asuma-sensei's head. He was paralyzed the moment it struck. Asuma-sensei stopped the ceiling corpse so that he could speak. Shikamaru tried to stop him, not sure he could bear it, but the old man was determined. There's just one more thing I couldn't tell you the last time I spoke them, and it's simply this. I have nothing more to tell you. Your Ino Shikacho formation is complete. The moment the ceiling cloth had encompassed their teacher, Choji let out a cry, allowing himself to grow taller. He declared that with the help of his teammates, he was going to end the battle. Choji had never sounded so sure of himself, and Shikamaru found that he couldn't think of a scenario where he didn't succeed. Choji's wings had grown so large that they reached to the top of the cliff wall. Chapter 68, Second Wave. Choji had truly turned the tide of the battle. Shikamaru instructed him to go after Niji's father and Kakazu, since they were the two biggest threats. Uncle Choza knew down well from what Shikamaru could tell and was working closely with the ceiling corp to trap the man. In the meantime, Shikamaru protected Ino as she used her mind transfer to take over as many of the Zetsu bodies as possible, whilst he also instructed the rest of the forces into creating smaller skirmishes to take down the Zetsus en masse. The battle was won. Or at least, it was, until a giant humanoid statue appeared on the battlefield. The combined force of Choza and Choji did nothing to stop it. From the description, Shikamaru realized what it was facing them. With a heavy feeling in his stomach, he watched the thing walk towards the forces, trying to work out what Madara's endgame was. That must be the thing that can rip the nine tails from Naruto, he whispered, barely noticing Ino's gasp of horror. The tailed beasts are in that thing? Shit! So is part of the eight tails. Madara is making a move for Kinkaku and Ginkaku. Shikamaru charged for the location of the gourd, arriving too late to stop the masked man from possessing the sacred objects. The man seemed surprised when Shikamaru voiced that he knew what Madara was planning and how he had used the two nine-tails charged men. The Nara heir wondered how long he could keep the leader of the enemy forces talking. Madara was a legend, a once-in-a-lifetime powerhouse. There was no denying that Shikamaru was far outclassed. He doubted that his shadow was truly holding the man, and there was no way he could fight him. In the Ino Shikacho formation, Choji was the physical power, and even with his strength, Shikamaru couldn't think of a plan to take down Madara. There was an inhuman screech, drawing Shikamaru's attention upwards. With wide eyes, he watched the foot of the humanoid statue come rushing towards him. His mind froze along with his body. The only thought he had was of Naruto. Her smile when he told her he loved her, her eyes when she was hiding her intelligence, the mild blush she would get on her tan cheeks whenever he told her she was beautiful. Waking up beside her, having her reach out for him without realizing she was doing so, the way she could go from blank face to blinding smile in a blink. Would anyone else appreciate all of that? It was hard not to, and yet she had spent years being overlooked. He hoped she would find someone else who did. Closing his eyes, he tried to keep the image of her grin in his mind. He felt something slam into his side, then heard air rush past his ears. Seconds later he heard a violent crash and felt bits of debris. Blinking away the assault of light, dust, and the vertigo from his sudden movement, Shikamaru looked beside him. Choji stared hard at the dust cloud the statue had caused, waiting to see if they had to move again. Thanks, Shikamaru breathed, feeling a bruise forming on his ribs from Choji's fast rescue. No problem, Choji assured before gasping. The dust had finally cleared so they could see where Shikamaru should have died. There was a giant crater left by the statue's foot, yet the statue itself was gone. Turning his eyes to the cliff, he could see soldiers up above looking around with no true urgency that would lend to the statue having jumped up there. It had truly just disappeared. Is it like a summoning creature? The Nara wondered. Pulling himself together, he moved to join the other commanders. The fighting appeared to have ended for now, but Shikamaru would like the advice of a war-seasoned comrade before he took a relieving breath. The senior fighters agreed that the fighting had ended for now, though all of them warned that now that the enemy knew their strength, they would be better prepared. Shikamaru wasn't sure he could really say the same for them after their encounter with the enemy. The white clone force was rather easy to take out, and it was mostly the reincarnated force that was the true challenge. At least Shikamaru and his team had faced the hardest emotional battle they would have to ever face. When they were finally able to make camp safely, he collapsed next to Choji, gratefully accepting the food that Uncle Choza passed him. The small group were silent as they filled their stomachs, Ino diet persona taking a back seat for the betterment of her chakra and the uncertainty of the next meal. After they had finished, the first to break the quiet was Uncle Choza. You three have made me very proud. Even with my hesitation? Choji uttered, his head down, but his eyes lifted to his father. Of course. Asuma-sensei always told me that your strength laid in your kindness, and you proved him right today. I understand why you struggled to fight your sensei. I can't say I wouldn't have faltered too. But you overcame that, with the help of your team. The next generation of Ino Shikacho has far surpassed the previous. I am very proud of you for that, not just your physical and team strength, but how strong you are as people. I have hope that the generation after you only grow even more. Our children, Choji breathed. That is still a far-off dream, especially with he looked down at his stomach, that was much smaller than usual, and gave a laugh. Well, give me a week. Choji, if a woman doesn't want you because you like food, then she's not right for you. You are your best self when you have a little extra to you. If you hadn't had that extra weight, you wouldn't have had the energy to lead the win today. Ino patted him on the shoulder. Any woman you end up with should recognize what a strong, caring person you are. Maybe you should take your own advice, Ino, Shikamaru commented with a sly look at the woman. Why diet for a guy? Shouldn't he not care if you have a few extra pounds if you're still happy, healthy, and strong? The blonde picked up the apple that Shikamaru hadn't eaten yet, taking an exaggerated bite from it. She then threw the apple at Shikamaru whilst letting the juice run down her face. He caught the apple with a laugh as he watched his teammate chew in an unladylike manner. I do agree with Choji though, Ino went on, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. I find it hard to think about raising the next generation. At the moment I can barely think about after the war, let alone one day getting married and having children. At least I know I'll have you two with me. We can watch our kids surpass us together. It's less scary knowing we can do it as a team. Shikamaru, who had just raised the apple to his mouth to take a bite, stopped. A heavy weight dropped into his stomach as he lowered the fruit. He contemplated if it was his information to tell before deciding Naruto would understand, since he would affect him, and in extension Ino and Choji. He cleared his throat, looking at the floor of the tent. About that. The next generation of Shika will be Ryota's heir. Silence followed his words, but he could feel the three heavy stares. What? Why? Choji stammered. You've always wanted kids. Even when we were little. What changed? To be fair, I realized at 13 there was a chance I wouldn't have kids when I realized I was in love with someone I didn't know the gender of, Shikamaru joked weakly. But well, you know the jutsu used on my mother? At 3 nods of confirmation, Shikamaru took a deep breath. That same jutsu was used on Naruto. She can have children. Not many people know, but Naruto will understand me telling you guys. But, your mum had you, Ino muttered, looking pale. She was lucky, and was healed quickly to give her the remotest chance, but Naruto had the jutsu used on her multiple times. And before you get any ideas about the Nine Tails having helped, it looks like he didn't. It's unclear if he chose not to or if he couldn't. He took in the drawn faces of Choji, Ino, and Uncle Choza. It's not alright, because Naruto shouldn't have had to suffer, but in regards to our future, it's fine. Like I said, from around the age 13 I knew this was a possibility. I've spent more of my life not knowing if Naruto was male or female than I have knowing. And it changed nothing. Your father already had plans for Ryota's heir to take over years ago, Choza admitted. That made Shikamaru blink in surprise, so his uncle went on. After your first mission as a Chunin, Shikaku realized your feelings. He obviously only saw Naruto as a boy, and didn't know that you only care about Naruto, no one else, regardless of gender. As long as you help train the next Nara leader to be as strong and smart as you, the clans shouldn't have an issue. Our clans had no issues with your mother remaining the mother of the Nara clan, and I believe your mother has already declared Naruto her successor, much to all three clans' happiness. Shikamaru groaned, dropping his head into his hand. Of course. The chuckles from all three of his companions that grew into laughter was relieving. The sound of amusement drew the attention of Uncle Satoru, Danny, and Danny's son Jun, who ducked into the tent. For a moment Shikamaru thought it was his father who walked in, and wondered what had gone so wrong as to draw him out of headquarters. His uncle lacked the scars that Shikamaru's dad had and instead had a burnt-away left ear. He was a little taller, though Shikaku argued that his hair was just longer to add the height. Good to see you lot in good spirits, Danny grinned. After what you three did, you should be. Gave the rest of us some much-needed morale. Danny threw himself on the ground. Uncle Satoru sighed at his friend's actions before addressing the blushing Ino Shikacho. It was good to see how much you three have grown. I can still remember when you were all so little. Feel free to tell embarrassing stories of them when they were tiny tots, June piped up. Let's not. I get that enough off my dad. Ino groaned, burying her red face in her hands. Could always tell stories of June when he was little, Danny cackled, stretching out lazily. Why must you turn on me? My own father! June gasped, grasping his chest like he was wounded. Danny shrugged. I do what I want. How did you three fare in battle? Choza asked, smiling pleasantly at Danny and June's antics. We started with a squad of 40. We are down to 12. Uncle Satoru sighed again, stepping over his sprawling friend only to drop straight down onto his torso. Arg, you fool! A string of curses erupted from Danny's mouth as he threw the other Nara off him. The laughter it caused died quickly, not able to dispel the heavy air that Uncle Satoru's admission caused. Choji leant back on his arms, looking up at the canopy of the tent. I knew there would be losses, but the numbers are a lot more daunting than I ever expected. And we haven't even finished fighting yet. Stop! Uncle Satoru ordered. His words made all free Chunins pause. He had never raised his voice at them, unless for their own safety. He had always been the adult, along with Danny, who encouraged the little mischievous things they did as children. Stop thinking like that. If you let it take root in your mind, you won't be able to keep fighting. Don't forget the dead, but don't let their fate lead you to joining them. Hold on to the knowledge that you three have grown strong, surpassing your fathers. Use that strength to protect others and yourselves from joining the dead. It was hard to say if his uncle's words worked. Shikamaru did turn his mind onto their remaining fighting force, but more in the capacity of trying to calculate how best to keep them alive. Unfortunately, his attempts to balance the odds in their favor started to send him mad when the fighting had a 3-day lull. Other battlefields had some skirmishes, such as Gaara's battlefield with the resurrected Kage, who were apparently trying to help the allied forces take them down. Hinata's battlefield had had the heaviest fighting in the 3 days. They had fared well though, seeing as they had had a large concentration of white setsus but minimal resurrections. The quiet was making Shikamaru start to feel uncomfortable. After such a strong first wave, how could their enemy, led by Madara, bring such a weak second wave? He knew there was something wrong, but he couldn't work out what it was at all. There was no way they had depleted the enemy forces already. Finally, after 3 days, the uncomfortable calm broke. Shikamaru stopped walking along the border that the alley forces had drawn for their side, waiting for June to catch up after he had called out to him. When he reached the Nara air, he rubbed sand out of his small eyes with a frustrated grunt. I never thought I would be bored during the war. I'm not complaining about the quiet, but at the same time it feels fake. I know the feeling. Shikamaru scanned the silent battlefield, returning Danny's wave as he slowly made his way over to them. It's frustrating that I can't work out what the enemy's angle is. Are they trying to draw out Naruto and the Jinchuriki for the Eight Tails? June shrugged his broad shoulders, looking up at Shikamaru. I'll follow your lead either way. He felt a heavy feeling drop into his stomach. June was older than Ryota by 7 years. He was often their babysitter when they were all younger. He had always been the one to take them into the Nara forest when they had all been young, and scared of getting lost. Now, he not only had to physically look up at Shikamaru, who had never noticed until now how short June was, but he was also letting Shikamaru be the one to lead them through the forest, as it were. He tried to think of something brave to say, like June used to, like if you walk in a straight line long enough, you'll find your way out, but he couldn't think of anything. He was saved from mumbling something that wouldn't have been as fitting by Danny drawing closer. Any word? Shikamaru asked, getting a shake of the head as a reply. His quiet was unusual but not wholly unexpected. He surveyed the surrounding area again, not wanting to let his guard down. He started walking along his patrol route, June and Danny trailing behind. Dad, I thought you were meant to be patrolling the med tents, June commented, only getting a grunt in reply. June shot Shikamaru a confused look, something Shikamaru barely caught in his brief pause to look at the two Naras. Out of the corner of his eye, as he turned away, the sun glinted off the sharp edge of a kunai, catching his eye. Turning back towards the two men felt like moving through mud. He could see Danny raising a kunai, aimed at June's unguarded back. June must have noticed the look of horror and panic on Shikamaru's face because he turned his head sharply in time to see his father bring down the blade. There was a shout, though Shikamaru wasn't sure from who, then his vision filled with blood. All sounds seemed to come through a filter. When he finally took in the scene in front of him, his stomach launched. It felt like he had been frozen for hours, months, or years, but it must have been only moments. Pulling out a kunai, Shikamaru embedded it to the hilt in Danny's chest, aiming up and under the ribs, to the heart. He knew. He knew this wasn't Danny, and yet, as the man's once lively eyes died, he felt like throwing up. The jutsu should break, the gensui, or whatever it was, should break. As the kunai slipped from his fingers and Danny's body sagged to the ground, Shikamaru nearly cried with relief as all color left the body, leaving a white setsu behind. Shikamaru, June called urgently. Turning, he found June scrambling to his knees, moving to the prone body of Uncle Satoru. The two men rolled the older Nara onto his back, seeing the blood fountaining out of his side. His mouth gaped open but his chest didn't rise or fall. The short scuffle must have alerted other forces because next moment Danny was running towards them. Shikamaru pulled another kunai and yelled for Danny to stop. He didn't listen, his eyes focused on his son and the body of his best friend. Stepping in front of June, Shikamaru stretched out his shadow, halting Danny mid-run. Let me go, Shikamaru! This white setsu looked like you. How do I know you're not one too? Danny's eyes flicked to Shikamaru before focusing past his hip at the two behind him. I don't know. Satoru hated me when I first married Mina, so your dad refused to let me become a Nara. I won Satoru over by always offering him his favorite lolly whenever he saw me. He knew what I was trying to do and just found it funny, and wanted the lollies. Shikamaru shot a quick look over his shoulder at June, who looked up from the blood over his hands long enough to give a nod of confirmation. He let Danny through but kept his kunai out. Danny dropped down next to Uncle Satoru, his hands hovering over his chest like he feared hurting him if he touched him. Finally, he put a finger against the other man's wrist. Shikamaru held his breath, praying that this contact would make his uncle jump alive again, laughing about how he had gotten one over on them all like he had done to Danny so many times. So many of Shikamaru's memories of his uncle contained him laughing and joking, a stark contrast to his older brother. Shikamaru's eyes stung the moment Danny's shoulders started shaking and a strangled, guttural cry ripped from the older man's lips. He felt the world tilt as he truly looked at his uncle. His side was split open, his chunin vest having been cut at the small strip of elastic between the front panels and the back. The blood that had poured out of him had since congealed on the flat, colorless ground in a scarlet pool. His dark eyes, identical to his brother's, were glassy and dulled, the lines of his face smooth, and his skin ashen. Uncle Satoru looked as though he had lost his years of experience whilst gaining many more years as well. The contradiction looked wrong on the face of a man who had lived his life through logic. Danny asked what had happened and June relayed the events that led to this moment. The events that led to Uncle Satoru growing cold, staring unseeingly up at them. "He died thinking I was trying to kill you?" Danny asked in a wobbly voice. "No," Shikamaru snapped. "He knew it wasn't you, that's why he didn't call out to you or try to talk sense into you. He knew you, he didn't die thinking his best friend turned against us." Danny nodded weakly, his chin trembling. We should move him. The enemy can't get a hold of his body. And we need to alert all forces that they are infiltrating through transformation." That statement jogged Shikamaru's mind into gear. He numbly watched June reach over and close Uncle Satoru's eyes, something he thought only happened in fiction. They would have to ensure they used trusting channels to tell people. Although, if he found Ino, he could relay the warning to his father safely. He would have to think of a safe question to test his team members. He informed Danny and June about what he was doing before waving over two medics that had come running after the confrontation. He instructed the two Naras to stay with the bodies, in case the medics were untrustworthy. He found Ino in a medical tent with two subordinates. "Stay there," he ordered the two who looked bewildered as he beaconed Ino closer. "Who designed your house and why?" "Sigh, because he remembered me saying the old house was kinda cold." Ino frowned at him. "Shikamaru, what's going on? Do you know those two? Have they been anywhere near the battlefield?" Ino looked over her shoulder at the two younger ninjas. Shikamaru was fairly certain that they had been in the last round of Chunin exams. "No, they have been only in the tents. They don't have enough experience in battlefield medicine, so they assist in the post-battle healing." "Good." He signaled them over and instructed them to go see to his uncle's body and relieve the other two. He told them to ensure they let the two other Naras know that he had sent them. "What's going on? Has the fighting started again?" Shikamaru heaved a sigh and ran a hand down his face, feeling his false confidence slipping now that it was just him and Ino. "Uncle Satoru is dead." Her shuddered gasp made his eyes prick. He grinded his teeth and gave a dry swallow. After a moment he looked back up at Ino, noticing her wet cheeks. "I need to speak to our fathers." At the woman's nod he put his hand on her shoulder and closed his eyes. He waited until the connection was established before calling out to his uncle Inoichi. "Shikamaru, is everything all right?" his uncle asked in alarm. It wasn't a scheduled update, so of course he would know something was wrong. "I need to speak directly to my father." He was thankful that his uncle didn't question him further, and in a moment he heard his father's gruff voice in his head. With a deep breath, he started. The enemy had infiltrated through transformation. Satoru Nara has been killed in the line of duty. The enemy took on the appearance of Danny Nara and attempted to kill June Nara. His father was silent longer than Shikamaru expected. He was skilled at compartmentalizing, but perhaps his little brother's passing was something he couldn't process. Finally, he spoke, in a softer voice. "Did June not notice a difference in his father's chakra presence, or was there no time?" The younger Nara nearly swore. He hadn't even thought of that. As father and son, even if he was horrible at sensing chakra, June should have noticed something off. "No, he didn't. I could tell that both of us found Danny's behavior off, but his chakra didn't alert either of us." "Just a moment." Shikaku went silent for some time before a grunt of frustration resounded through the link. "It seems the other teams have encountered similar issues, and even those with sensory chakra haven't noticed the enemy until they attacked. It seems only the most sensitive sensory types can pick up any inconsistencies with the chakra of those who have been copied. Even then, It's only a small impression that could be caused from anything from stress to hunger. It appears that the Zetsus fed off these people whilst fighting. Shikamaru did swear then. They're using our chakra to hide. That means there is only one way to track them down. By tracking hostile chakra. It's hard to track hostile chakra. Many sensory types can't do it because it's easy to mistake any negative chakra as hostile chakra. Not only that, but it's hard to pick up chakra types like that, Uncle Inoichi explained. There are probably only half a dozen people in the entire 5 nations that can do that. Even if they are all able to do so, it will take far too long. There is one person who can sense on mass scale for hostile chakra. It was the first type of hostile chakra they ever picked up on. Naruto, she can do it. Shikamaru, Uncle Inoichi started in a level voice. When you were 7, you told me you needed to have a serious discussion with me. What was the topic of that conversation? That you can't cook. He heard the sigh of relief. Had to check since you just recommended we bring Naruto, the target of the enemy, out of hiding. You see the flaw in your plans, right? I do. And I hate having to suggest it, but if we can't think of any other way, we'll have to. But once we do, this battle will become much more dangerous. Until a decision is made for a plan, we should try to minimize casualties. Separate everyone, try and have people that have to move around be vetted where possible. I asked Ino a question like you did with me, so we both know we're clear. But that plan still has flaws. We'll try to think of something and we'll alert all forces about the need to distance yourselves until we think of a more solid plan. Shikaka sighed. Hopefully we won't need to call on Naruto. Though, the last we heard, she was doing well with her training, so at the very least we may not have to worry about the seal weakening. We will keep in touch. Stay safe, both of you. Shikamaru removed his hand from Ino's shoulder, wobbling over to one of the medic cots and dropped down. He buried his face in his hands and tried to block out the sounds of Ino walking closer. He felt her sit next to him and put her arm around his shoulders, pulling him close and letting him drop his head on her shoulder. We were meant to be done with this before Naruto ever found out, and now I'm the one suggesting that she join the war. He gave a shuddering breath. What about if they go with my plan and they get her? You're forgetting the reason that you fell in love with her. Ino gave him a jostle, making him look up at her soft smile. She's amazing? He gave her a half smile. That, but I meant the fact that you can't predict her. Even her enemies can't guess what she's going to do. It's helped her stay alive. And even so, she's powerful, so with the allied force backing her, she'll be alright. We just need to trust that. He needed to take a breath to calm his racing heart. There was always the chance that they found another way to track down the white Zetsus, and they would be able to keep Naruto in protection for longer. Giving Ino a thankful hug, he got up to return to his duties and await his father's orders. They ended up putting in the orders for people to stay away from each other, and not move around too much if helped. If one had to go up to someone else, it was common to check if they were who they appeared if you knew them. If you didn't, you held a kunai at the ready. This had led to some Zetsus being revealed, but had also caused some panic at the idea of how many Zetsus had copied members of their forces. It was clear that this plan wouldn't last much longer from panic alone. To make matters worse, the enemy was taking advantage of the fact that they couldn't safely come to each other's aids by attacking. He ducked under a white Zetsu's arm as they tried to stab him. They knew chakra was drawn through either by the hands or the mouth, so Shikamaru made sure to avoid being in range of both. As he came back up, Shikamaru sliced open the side of the Zetsu. An image of his uncle, bleeding on the ground, flashed through his mind, distracting him from the Zetsu that sprang from behind a boulder. He almost had him in his shadow when an ally threw a kunai at the Zetsu, cutting straight through the jugular. Shikamaru gave a nod of thanks before turning to the advancing Zetsus. He stepped out of the way of one's lunge, kneeing them in the chest, and, as they were off-balanced, drove his bloodied kunai into their chest. He gave one tug at the blade, finding it lodged. Letting it go, he tried to get another from his weapon's pouch, only to find another Zetsu too close. Slamming his hands together, he sent out his shadow to pierce the enemy. There were only 3 Zetsus left facing him, and 2 facing his unknown savior. Wrapping his shadow around one Zetsu's torso, he threw him into the other 2, throwing them to the ground and allowing him to shoot a look at his fellow ninja to see how he was faring. As he did so, he saw the man barrel at him, a kunai in his hand. In a split second, Shikamaru's shadow exploded out of him in barbs. The three Zetsus that had jumped to their feet after being thrown, as well as the two that had been running behind the ninja, all found themselves impaled on longer pikes. The ninja was mere inches from Shikamaru's face, his blood running down the black spike puncturing his chest. For a moment, it looked like he wasn't going to change, that Shikamaru had misunderstood, that he had been trying to get to a Zetsu right behind Shikamaru and instead was killed. Then, almost painfully slowly manner, his tan flesh turned stark white. As Shikamaru breathed a sigh of relief, and looked out past his protective barrier to see if he was safe for now, he heard a familiar grunt in his head. Shikamaru. Dad, has a plan been made? His father sighed, and he knew what was coming. We're calling in Naruto. She's became aware of the war already. A force has gone to try and stop her and Killer Bee from breaking through the protective barriers, but I'm about to call them off. Though, the two of them aren't even being slowed down by the barriers, so I feel like this is an order I'm barely making. His father sighed again, sounding world-weary. Shikamaru gave a chuckle. Sounds like her. But it's for the best. I'm ordering all forces here to not move until told otherwise. Hopefully Naruto won't take long, but it's not safe otherwise. If any disobey, they will be assumed to be a Zetsu. Understood. Each battlefield is deciding for themselves how to handle the situation based on how large their forces are and the terrain. Yours is one of the most difficult, so I will support your measures. However, we have gotten word from elsewhere on the battlefield that an old enemy of yours has been resurrected. Shikamaru felt his stomach drop. Those they had went up against when they tried to retrieve Sasuke were back. It was almost like the enemy knew. Only the one Choji faced and the one he himself faced were on their battlefield. The other two were where Niji and Kiba were. Taking a deep breath, Shikamaru confirmed to his father he understood before setting a plan in motion. He met up with Ino and Choji, explaining to them about the plan to utilize Naruto's natural sensing ability before getting Ino to relay his orders to stay where each person was. The three then moved to where the distress signal for two of the Sound Four had been sent out to headquarters. Accepting earplugs off Ino, Shikamaru and Choji split up to deal with their foes from 3 years prior. This was going to be simple. He was much stronger and wiser now. He knew all her moves, and because of the lack of fighting lately he still had plenty of chakra. He had grown a lot. This was going to be simple. He should have known it wasn't going to be simple. Taking Tayuya out apparently activated a failsafe of some kind. It apparently was the same for the other three as well if their presence in the odd, red dome was anything to go by. At first it appeared that the fight would still be in their favor. The four of them could easily fight alongside each other, protecting each other where needed. However, it quickly became apparent that they had been transferred to the dome barrier for a reason. However, as the battle turned against them, Shikamaru noticed their flaring chakra. Antagonizing the Sound Four almost reminded him of being trapped in the Earth Dome all those years prior. It crossed his mind that if Naruto hadn't been silently panicking, she would have been able to locate the enemy for him. That thought almost made him laugh. Instead, he focused on his plan, even if only Choji, yet again, understood his actions. He grinned when he heard the knocking on the barrier. His heart felt lighter with each resounding bang that echoed through, matching the beats in his chest. The jutsu that held them there started weakening with each crack that appeared in the dome. Shikamaru kept his eyes trained on the point of impact. There was only a second between the dome shattering and Naruto descending, and the jutsu breaking, but in that one breath Shikamaru saw her. Her orange and black jumpsuit, her long blonde hair pulled back into the high ponytail typical of the Naras. It was just a glimpse, but it was everything to him in that moment. As he was whisked away to, he found out later, return to his body, he had to smile. Although he was worried about Naruto's safety, he couldn't deny that he felt better with Naruto fighting at his side. All their pieces were officially on the board. Chapter 69, There's No Place Like Hell. His body felt heavy and slow as he sat up. He listened to Ino's explanation of what happened after he and Choji faced two of the Sound Four. It took him more focus than usual, which he found very troublesome, but he ended up getting the idea that Ino was able to use her chakra to keep theirs flowing and therefore alive. She let them know that Shino was able to do something similar for Kiba and Niji. It was a relief to Shikamaru to hear that. It would have been a bitter victory for them if two of them died from their souls being sucked out of their body. Honestly, that was not a thought he expected to have, but he had a feeling he was going to be having stranger thoughts before the war was over. Pulling himself to his feet, he looked around at the allied forces that were still unable to move around liberally. He could see some ninjas off in the distance that were beginning to argue. He groaned, wondering if his sluggish body would be able to make it to them before kunais were pulled. Before he could even take a step, he saw an orange blur dart past the men. Next moment, three all turned on a fourth ninja who was revealed to be a Zetsu. The blur kept darting around the battlefield, Zetsus showing themselves wherever it went. Whenever the blur attacked a hidden enemy, a tree appeared. Shikamaru chose not to question it, and instead let his heart rate increase as the new force of nature came closer to him. It didn't even cross his mind that there was a Zetsu near him. His narrow, brown eyes flickered across the field, never leaving Naruto. She moved so fast he couldn't make out anything about her. He knew that she must be a clone. His father would have insisted on the real one hiding, and even if he didn't, Naruto often used clones to throw off enemies, so why wouldn't she now? Shikamaru wondered if this clone had the same hairstyle, and the same orange with black markings that he had only gotten a glimpse of before. After dotting around the rather large battlefield, including the camp, Naruto skidded to a halt a mere meter from Shikamaru. He went to move towards her but noticed how she held herself. Naruto wasn't watching him, and instead her large, blue eyes were unfocused, her head tilted to the side in the way she commonly did when sensing people. As he waited for her to come back to him, he wondered what it was like to sense so many chakras, so many personalities. Did she see it in her mind's eye, or did it feel like a breeze against bare skin? Finally, her eyes cleared and focused on the man in front of her. No more Zetsus. She instantly dashed to him, giving him barely a moment to brace himself before she collided with him, wrapping her arms around him. Shikamaru heard the shuddering breath she took as her hands ran over his back in a wild frenzy. He shivered when her lips pressed against the pulse in his neck. He found reassurances tumbling from his lips as he pulled her close. "I'm here, I'm okay. You saved me. Why didn't you tell me about the war?" she asked accusingly, her voice wet. "I couldn't. It was decided that you would be put into hiding. Even if I had disagreed with that decision, I was under orders to not say anything." Naruto tensed at that before taking a breath and relaxing. "I guess we can both understand being in that position." Shikamaru wasn't certain what she meant by that, but given the context he knew not to ask. No matter how much they cared for each other, they were ninjas, and that meant there would always be a level of secrecy they couldn't share with each other. He couldn't hold it against Naruto for following orders. Instead of commenting on what she had said, he pulled back, cupping her jaw and cheek in his large hand. Long gone were the times where he would only kiss Naruto in private, even finding a small thrill in privacy that could have been easily interrupted. Now, he kissed her, sparing no mind to his two teammates just behind them, or the allied forces that he commanded and who had been staring at Naruto in awe since her appearance on the battlefield. All he cared about in that moment was Naruto. Of having her in his arms, of being able to see that, for the moment, she was safe, being able to convey to her how important she was to him, not because of the war, but because of who she was. He held her to him tightly, feeling Naruto match his grip on the back of his vest. At the neckline of the vest, Naruto's fingers kneaded into the muscles of his shoulder, her short-clipped nails pinching into his flesh in an oddly comforting manner. Breaking the kiss, he trailed more kisses along her cheek, under her earlobe, and lastly her neck before tucking his head into the curve of her shoulder. He released a shuddered breath. He hadn't realized how much he needed that broken release of oxygen in conjunction with gripping Naruto close until the tension on his back and shoulders eased. "I'm glad you're here," he admitted as Naruto stroked his back, leaning into him. "I love you." Naruto didn't respond at first, something that Shikamaru wasn't surprised about. He had no desire to push her. Finally, in a whisper, she spoke. "I missed you." "I missed you too," he whispered back, figuring that Naruto needed the soft voice. I wanted to talk to you about my training, and about having met my mom. She was amazing, and beautiful, and smart. Naruto sniffled. So, like you. The comment elicited a wet chuckle from his girlfriend. Taking a deep breath, he pulled back, looking at Naruto's startlingly blue eyes. Now that you've dealt with the Zetsus, we can move the focus back to winning the war. What of the other battlefields, though? Clear, Naruto assured. I sent at least 2 clones to each battlefield so I could dispel one to pass on information. I'll make a new one in a moment to dispel so that the real me will know you're alright. Having your dad contact me about you was terrifying. I'm sorry. Shikamaru stroked her cheek with his thumb. He sighed, dropping his hand. I have to instruct the troops. If this battlefield is clear, we will have to start marching to meet up with, most likely, the 3rd Division, led by Kakashi-sensei, but I'll have to check with my father first. Naruto nodded, turning her gaze onto Ino and Choji. She addressed her question to the larger man as Shikamaru moved to instruct the forces. You alright? Yeah, thanks to Ino. Shikamaru looked back at his teammates and girlfriend as Naruto drew the other blonde into her arms, holding her tight as she thanked her. Ino looked bashful as she returned the hug. I couldn't just let my teammates die. Naruto chuckled at Ino's mumble, pulling back. Instantly, Shikamaru lunged for Naruto as she wobbled on weak legs. Ino's nails scratched against the sleeves of Naruto's jacket as she tried to grip her arms. With a grunt, Naruto's back hit Shikamaru's chest, making him stumble back a step. Her head lolled back onto his shoulder. Her blue eyes were unfocused but not glazed. In many ways it reminded him of when Naruto filed away new information. Shikamaru had time to share a worried look with his 2 teammates before Naruto blinked. He felt her turn from the slumped form in his arms to more leaning into him by choice. He watched her attention come back to them, and a frown make its way onto her face. Naruto, love, are you alright? His words caused a shiver to run through the blonde's body. She started, making Shikamaru know he wasn't going to like what she said. Yes, but the real me is dealing with Nagisa. He's not in control of himself. It's alright though, cause Itachi is in control and he's helping her, me. Also, the clones on another battlefield are being taken out en masse. The enemies they're being handled now, but sensory overload is no fun. Wait, Sasuke's brother is on our side now? Choji asked with a frown. He always was. It's a bit confusing. I'll explain later. Naruto sighed, running a hand down her face. It's not going to be long before Madara finds the real me at this rate. Now that we can move safely without worrying that our own people will attack us, we can join with the other forces and hopefully make a move on Madara. Shikamaru turned to Ino. Can you connect me to our fathers? The entire allied forces converged into one army again and marched to meet the real Naruto. The clone that had been with Shikamaru had had enough time to tell him that she and Killer Bee had been found and were being aided by Kakashi-sensei and Gai-sensei before she had to dispel. Shikamaru had understood that the army could only move so fast without risking losing people or depleting chakra, and the supply train needed to be moved and guarded too. They needed to be able to set up a field hospital at the back of the battlefield. To make it worse, when they could feel a rumbling through the ground, the echoes of attacks too large for the human brain to truly fathom, they had been ordered to stop and eat. He understood, he really did. He had Choji as a team member and had a pathetic amount of chakra himself, so food breaks were a must, but every time he took a bite, he felt the crash of battle. He wished he could sense chakra like Naruto so he could better tell who was causing the largest commotions. He didn't need Naruto's talent to feel the presence of the fighters though. There were large releases of chakra raging through the air, making the assembled forces agitated. It was hard to pick out the individual people causing this maelstrom, but the heat of powerful fire types, the drowning pressure of water types, and a scarring light from one individual were noticeable. There was also one thing that Shikamaru wasn't sure others could pick out of the mass, but he felt the searing heat that left his face feeling raw, and his eyes itchy, then a refreshing breeze as a soothing balm following on its heels. He grabbed onto that feeling, pulling it into his chest, indulging in the tunneling burn it caused so he could relish in the soft breaths that came next. He sat, engulfing the presents greedily as the other ninjas who hadn't inhaled their food in panic wrapped up their meals. Once they did reach Naruto, everything turned into a nightmare. Any advantage they were able to press in the beginning was turned against them. The man they thought was Madara wasn't Madara. The real Madara eventually appeared, and the 10 tails was partly formed. The 9 tails and the 8 tails hadn't been extracted, so the 10 tails wasn't at its full power, and yet it was still harrowing. It shot tailed beast bombs the size of a house with what appeared to be no effort. It leveled the bomb at Naruto. With so little chakra left in her system, she had no hope of fighting against it, or even dodging. Shikamaru was able to come up with a desperate bid for time. Numerous rock walls could slow it down, and Killer Bee could change its trajectory, but what of the next one, and the one after that? How long would it take Sakura to heal Naruto? It ended up not mattering. The bomb crashed through all the walls they created, and Bee could barely hold it off. Everyone braced for the inevitable impact. Shikamaru had a fleeting thought of trying to get to Naruto's side before it hit, knew he wouldn't make it, but started to run anyway. The giant sphere vanished. He blinked, coming to a halt, wondering if he was already dead. The giant globe of energy was gone, and in its place stood Naruto. Naruto, in chest spines. No, not Naruto. This man was taller, his chest didn't have the padded look Naruto's had when passing as a man, and his hips were narrow. His hair was longer than Naruto had it when it was short, and he wore a long, white cloak with red accents. But he had the same yellow blonde hair and tan skin. Next moment the earth shook and water sprayed violently over the allied forces. Once he found his footing, Shikamaru ran towards Naruto, who was looking up at the newcomer with a glow to her face that almost looked out of place on a battlefield. It would have been if the man hadn't just saved all their lives. Naruto, Shikamaru called breathlessly. Are you alright? He felt Ino and Choji inhale sharply behind him, drawing his attention away from Naruto and towards the unknown man. On closer inspection, the suspicion that had started in him was confirmed. It was the 4th Hokage. He swore silently. Having to fight his girlfriend's father was not something he wanted to ever have to do. Then he noticed the other figure next to him. This one was shorter and older, and had the same blackness to the eyes that showed he was a reanimation. 3rd Hokage? Hello, Shikamaru, Ino, Choji, the man greeted, shooting an amused smile at the 4th's back. Even if the 4th could have seen his face, he wasn't paying him any attention. The man was fawning over his daughter, asking her a dozen questions and thanking Sakura for looking after his baby. Are you Naruto's friend? He asked, causing the pink-haired girl to wince. Not as much as I should be, she admitted, her focus still on healing Naruto. Dad, Naruto breathed, how did you get here? I got Orochimaru to resurrect him and the other Hokages, piped a voice, making Shikamaru start. I thought they could be of help, and I had a few questions for some of them. Turning, the Nara spotted Sasuke strolling closer to his old teammates. Shikamaru felt his vision tunnel. He didn't notice himself move, but registered the dull crack, and the white-hot pain that flared through his fist. Sasuke stumbled back, a hand coming up to touch the split skin of his sharp cheekbone, and the already purpling line of his jaw. What the hell, Nara? Spat the traitor. Stay the hell away from Naruto, he roared, putting himself in between the 2 strongest ninjas of their time. Seriously? Playing the jealous boyfriend? I see her like a sister. Some brother you are. You killed her. For hours I thought she was dead. For hours Kakashi-sensei carried what he thought was a corpse back to the village. For a moment he saw self-loathing flicker through black eyes. That's enough. The sharp tone startled both men into looking down at the still crouching Naruto. Even though both men were taller than her when standing, in that moment Shikamaru saw her like he had seen Jiraiya all those years ago. Her pose was the same, and it also wasn't her size that gave off the frightening power he felt weakening his knees. Though he would admit this weakening came with a hint of fire that he both had certainly not felt when facing the Sannin, and hadn't expected to burn now. I appreciate you being angry over what happened, Shikamaru, but now isn't the time. And Sasuke, touch him and I'll hurt you, got it? The Chunin looked over at the rogue ninja, seeing the death glare that he leveled his way. Fine, he spat, before stalking away from them. Shikamaru had only just turned back to Naruto when another voice rang out in a strangled tone, followed by a groan from another. Did he say boyfriend? Naruto sighed. Seriously, Dad? Blue eyes, so much like the ones he loved, showing the critical gaze that Naruto always tried to hide, scanned over Shikamaru's form. Whereas when Naruto did something similar, Shikamaru found it enjoyable and even arousing, this was terrifying, leaving him feeling lacking. The fourth pursed his lips, his eyes narrowing. Are you a Nara? At the nod he received, he looked at him closer. Are you Shikaku's baby? You were born just before Naruto, the miracle baby. Yeah? Shikamaru looked to Naruto for help. He was used to being called that. For most of his informative years, his whole clan, as well as Choji's and Ino's, called him that. Dad. At first, he thought she got his silent plea, but then he saw what caused her panicked yell. The Ten Tails was powering up again. Shikamaru swore. Unless the fourth could send the bomb away again, they had no way to stop it. One look at the man's face told him that wasn't an option. Before he could formulate a plan, the Ten Tails changed its aim, shooting high into the air. Shikamaru stood frozen as it was shot over his head, sailing far into the distance. His brain only produced white noise when he tried to think of some other place for the enemy to aim. Surely, his calculations were off. Surely, the enemy didn't know where the headquarters were. Perhaps it aimed at the nobles who were on the move. It would have been bad for all the villages, but at that moment, he didn't care. He refused. Instead, he looked over at Naruto, who was still being healed by Sakura. She would be able to tell him the truth. He found her swaying dangerously on her hunches, blood coating her hand and more running down from under her shirt on her side. She looked green and Sakura's terrified voice reached through his muddled mind. Why is your chakra dipping? Never mind, tell me you have one of those disgusting mud balls. Naruto ordered in a voice Shikamaru had never heard before. Even with her sickly state, her back was straight and her face firm, even with its drawn nature. The fourth rushed forward to grab Naruto and support her. Shikamaru. He jumped at his dad's voice. Have you evacuated? He begged. Shikaku's chuckle was dry and resigned. Son. He should have been memorizing every word his father spoke to him in that moment. Instead, he listened to the timbre of his voice, the scratch it gained with the lower notes, and the smooth, rich grumble of the higher notes. Even his panic screech when he begged Shikamaru to burn what he assumed was porn was something that he wanted to hold dear. Part of his mind tried to think of something to make his father laugh, just once more so he could hear the rocky rumble, the deep notes tipping over themselves, one last time. The connection was cut only moments before the distant crash sounded. Shikamaru felt cotton push into his ears and ice water hit his stomach hard. Shikamaru must have kept fighting. He was still breathing, so he must have, and yet, he didn't remember even moving. His arm was bleeding, but he hadn't felt the tear. He tried to shake the feeling, but instead it caused the blood to rush past his ears, sounding sickeningly like the rumble following his father's death. He came back to himself briefly to see the 4 beast bombs a flower sprout was releasing. He tried to think of something to help save them but couldn't come up with a single plan. He felt his throat restrict. If his father had been here, if Shikamaru had died in his place, then perhaps everyone would survive. Crouching down, he tried to look like he was simply taking a breath to gather energy as he planned. In truth, there was nothing he could do. Looking at Choji, Shikamaru could tell that he knew as well as the Nara that they were doomed. Then, Naruto's tailed cloak reappeared. It was larger than before, and though the others didn't seem to notice, Shikamaru could sense that this cloak was slightly different. The Nine-Tails part of the chakra was more prominent, and had a sharper edge to it that hadn't been there before, even back when the Nine-Tails had been uncooperative. But there was more to it. At first it felt like Naruto's chakra still, but there was a difference to it. It wasn't as warm and energetic as hers, instead having a cooling, patient aspect to it. As he let his chakra poke at it, he felt a wave of emotions that the owner didn't even bother to hide. Most people kept their emotions out of their chakra, though Naruto was notorious for not bothering. This person was either the same, or he hadn't been able to. Upon examining the chakra, Shikamaru was instantly hit with a sense of love and pride for Naruto. It was different than his own, and he had to fight tears at the overwhelming sadness underneath it all. For some reason, Naruto had funneled her father's chakra into the cloak. Shikamaru had to fight the urge to shake off the cloak, the fatherly affection just making the hollow pit in his stomach worsen. Instead, he tried to focus on what Naruto was planning. Still, he was unable to think of anything. Surely these cloaks won't protect them from the beast bombs. And they didn't. Instead, Naruto used the cloaks to put them in indirect contact with her father, allowing him to teleport them all outside the barrier. He couldn't help but smile a little at the indignation of their friends at the thought that Naruto had also mastered that jutsu. Apparently Hinata and Neji had also noticed the added chakra though and ensured their friends that no, Naruto's father was the one to save them, though Neji pointed out that the plan had Naruto's fingerprints all over it. That small moment of victory, of Naruto outsmarting the enemy, only lasted a few minutes before a tree, apparently the true form of the Ten Tails, started decimating their ranks. The roots shot out, taking out countless allies with one sweep. And yet again he was useless. Every thought and plan still came sluggishly to the front of his mind, but the reasons why those ideas wouldn't work were easy to comprehend. The grip of the roots of the tree was almost welcoming. It pulled violently on his chakra, stripping him of the comfort of the Nine-Tails cloak before he felt his chakra veins burn, his cheeks hollowing. He almost gave himself to the feeling. It was forced to let him go before it took the last of his chakra, dropping him painfully on the ground. "I'm sorry, Dad, looks like I'm going to be right on your heels." "Sorry, Mum." "Sorry, Naruto." He was vaguely aware someone was cradling him, and he could hear Choji and Ino. There was a clawing at his stomach. Wonder if Choji would give me the last chip now? He thought, giving a tired chuckle that tore at his throat. His body shook, his stomach was racked with pain, and his throat burnt. Each breath took more energy than he had to spare. When his vision started to blur around the edges, he wondered if it would just be easier to close his eyes and sleep. The logical part of his brain told him that he might not wake up. The emotional half asked if that was so bad. He forced his eyes open for just a moment, wondering if he could get one last look at his friends, only to find himself surrounded by orange. For longer than he could guess, he wondered if he was in Naruto's form of heaven. When Choji's round face came into focus, Shikamaru realized it was just the cloaks he was seeing. His own was long gone, but it was comforting to see his friend's one still remained. The sight of those protective films, cast over all allied ninjas, truly showed not only how caring Naruto was, trying to save everyone, but how powerful. How had she gotten so far ahead of them all? Could any of them stand beside her? Perhaps Sasuke, but certainly not Shikamaru. He had never been a strong fighter. He had low chakra, and no matter how hard he trained, he wasn't an instinctual fighter like the two powerhouses of Team 7. Would he slow her down if he lived? He shook himself. Like hell. They had different strengths. Yes, Naruto was someone who fought through instinct, and was tremendously powerful, but he was the strategist. Like his father, he had the ability to direct an army, to bring an enemy to meticulous defeat. He might not be able to stand beside Naruto in battle, but he had his value on the field. Even if in this war he felt pathetically idiotic. Besides, that's not why he wanted to be with Naruto. It wasn't her prowess in a fight that drew his attention, it had been her humor, her heart, even her vulnerability, and her drive. And those were the things that he wanted to keep seeing. He couldn't leave that now. Fighting against the fatigue that was attempting to swallow him, he blinked, letting his environment come into focus around him. For a moment he thought he was hallucinating. He was surrounded by the Rookie 9, including Sai and Neji, though without Sasuke and Naruto. "Hey, stay awake!" snapped Sakura, her hands hovering over his chest. "I'm not letting you die on Naruto because you want a nap." "Never thought I'd agree with you, but here we are," he wheezed. He tried to focus on the first Hokage's information that Ino broadcasted to everyone, but it was hard. Everyone around them started whispering panicked words. Then there was a crash, followed by the sophisticated tone of Sasuke's voice. For a moment Shikamaru wondered if the Uchihas were taught how to properly enunciate every word. Next moment the panic that pushed on everyone stopped. Naruto somehow connected into Ino's link, probably through their mutual sensory chakra to filter thoughts into everyone's head. They were somewhat unfiltered, mostly memories. He saw Sasuke from Naruto's point of view. Now they had both had nothing. He knew Naruto was trying to show them that the one who had the least reason to fight was the last to give up. Then he saw himself studying her in class, then of Naruto thanking him for helping her learn to read. He saw Naruto's friends, saw the loss of Asuma-sensei, saw himself telling Naruto she wasn't a monster, no matter what, and he felt, truly felt, how those words had affected her. He had felt an echo of the hitch in her throat those words had caused, could see how intensely and sincerely he had looked as he said those words. Next, she showed Lord Jiraiya how much he had meant to her, how he had encouraged her to always fight to help others. The last image to filter into his mind was the shrine to her master, and the sheer overwhelming determination she had felt to fight against more pain like hers being caused. Everyone slowly straightened their backs, and even though the brief moment Shikamaru could open his eyes didn't allow him to see, he knew their gazes had turned as determined as Naruto's often was. He was overcome with the same desire to fight against his own frailty, to fight against the seemingly unbearable sadness the loss of his father had caused on him. Blinking over at Ino, who still stood with the first, he realized how selfish he had been. She was still fighting, pushing her loss to the back of her mind to stop as many further losses as possible. He would have said something to her, apologized for his neglect of her suffering, but the small surveillance of the field had taken all his strength, forcing him to close his eyes and focus on his feeble breaths and fighting through the pain. There was crashing of conflict going on around him, but he had no idea in whose favor the battle was going and who was causing the sounds. Naruto's name filtered through his ears as Hinata explained how she and Sasuke were fighting as one, but that was as close to an update as he had. If any more words were spoken, they were lost to the agony that racked his body as it continued to cannibalize itself. However, the pains started soothing themselves as a comforting presence spread throughout his body. "You don't understand," Sakura Ino said, her voice having the wobble it often got when she felt she was invading someone's privacy. "She's doing this unconsciously. Her chakra is acting on its own, merely from her deep desire to help Shikamaru. With my mind transition jutsu, I can sense it." If he breathed deeply, he could smell that scent that had started everything. He inhaled that fragrance, letting it fill his body. With it, Naruto's chakra flooded through his system, unbound and all-consuming. All traces of pain, hunger, and exhaustion were eradicated. The ache left by his father's death was still there, but it was easier to breathe around it now. With the chakra came Naruto's presence, not consciously like when she grabbed someone with her chakra, but in a rare, unfiltered sense. He felt an overwhelming sense of affection, adoration, devotion, and "I love you too, Naruto." He opened his eyes, barely paid any attention to his friends. "I'm sorry, Dad, Naruto doesn't want me to join you yet." "Shikamaru, stop talking right now." Even with her scolding, Shikamaru could see a faint blush on her cheeks at the confession he had voiced. "We're not going to let you die. Naruto, no, everybody needs you." "Dad, I only found out later that Naruto had persevered through a ton of painful and bitter things on her own, and I don't want her to ever go through that again. I love her. When I'm with her. I told you once, remember Dad, she's going to become a very important shinobi one day. I'm sure of it. When I'm with Naruto, she makes me want to follow her, walk by her side, no matter what. And even if she wasn't an important shinobi, I'd still want to walk beside her in life. She's not an idiot, even if she lets everyone think she is, but she can be naive at times, and unlike the first, she doesn't have a genius brother to help her as Hokage. But she does have me. Even if she doesn't want to be with me for our lives, even if her feelings for me diminish and disappear, I'll still be there to support her." He pushed himself up, even when his muscles gave a protest. "So I'm sorry, Dad, I'm afraid I can't join you on the other side just yet because there is no one more qualified than me to be Naruto's advisor." "Thank you, Sakura," Ino breathed. "Yeah, thanks, Sakura," Shikamaru repeated, sincerely. "Easy there, Shikamaru, you might become my advisor instead." Kiba's words made Akamaru whimper. "Don't worry, Akamaru, A Hokage can have up to 3 advisors. Don't worry, Akamaru, Kiba's never going to be Hokage, Shikamaru rasped jokingly. Shikamaru! Choji cheered, hugging him, drawing a smile from the renewed man. Part of him wasn't surprised that their biggest chance came down to a giant tug-of-war match. It was Naruto's plan after all. There was something almost inspiring to see this woman, who had been shunned and mistreated for having a tailed beast inside her, standing with 2 other Jinchurikis and trying to pull the tailed beast closer, embracing them. The way the tailed beasts, upon being freed, were willing to help in the fight simply because of Naruto raised question for the Nara, such as how did Naruto meet them all, but also it didn't surprise him. For a long time, he had noticed that the blonde didn't see the Ninetales as a monster, and instead a companion or even annoying roommate with a foul vocabulary. In truth, Shikamaru had started to see the fox in a similar way. He knew that the Ninetales had decimated the village when Naruto was born, but he had also felt the fox's presence when Naruto saved his life during the pain attack. Naruto knew what it was like to be truly dehumanized, and perhaps that allowed her to connect with the tailed beasts in a way that no other Jinchuriki had been too afraid to try. They finally had a chance to end the war. The 10 Tails was empty of the other tailed chakra, and everyone was working on sealing Madara. Shikamaru could almost feel the freeing breath he was hoping to pull into his lungs when the fighting finally ended. Then Madara somehow broke through the control of the resurrection jutsu. Even though his subordinate wanted to end the fight, he couldn't. The tailed beasts themselves, with Gaara, tried to seal him, but it failed. It shouldn't have failed. Even all 9 of the tailed beasts, along with the 3 Jinchurikis, could barely seem to scratch him. To make matters worse, the enemy summoned statues to keep the allied ninjas busy, stopping Shikamaru from keeping a close eye on Naruto. The only one keeping them safe from the statue was the resurrected 3rd Hokage. Naruto! The rough, vicious voice ripped through the battlefield, hitting everyone in the heart. He knew that voice, had heard it whispered on the battlefield against Pain. A small threat to not hurt his holder. Had heard it on their current battlefield as it shook the earth around it. Everything Shikamaru had read about the Ninetales described him as pure rage, but in that one word that was proved an utter lie. A silent scream was wrenched from his mouth as he saw Gaara fly towards the 5th Hokage, a blonde form laying limp on the sand cloud with him. Shikamaru ran, his eyes wide. He could feel it. Her chakra, even though the cloak still coated everyone, had disappeared. She had always flooded the area, no matter what she was doing, but now, nothing. There was only one reason for that. He didn't bother to wipe away the tears that blurred his vision. He had to get to her. He had to do something, even if it was to hold her in her last moments. Naruto had been without someone most of her life. He refused to let that be the case in death too. As he stumbled over the war-torn ground, he never looked away from Naruto, laying on a bed of sand. He staggered to a halt as Gaara changed trajectory, realizing that the Kazakage was taking Naruto to her father. He had also picked up Sakura along the way. Shikamaru was divided between fury that Gaara hadn't found him instead of her, and hope that she might save Naruto, or at least keep her alive long enough to be with her father. Changing directions, he ran after Gaara's sand cloud, his heart pounding and his throat burning. As he fell drastically behind, one of Sai's paper birds appeared before him, and he jumped on it without a second thought. The member of Team 7 didn't even glance at him as he pushed the bird to go faster. Even if he could talk in that moment, Shikamaru doubted he could truly verbalize how grateful he was to Sai. They were gaining ground when the enemy blocked their way. Sai banked to the left, dodging a wall of fire shot from one of the statue's many mouths. They tried to angle the bird straight up, but whether consciously or not, the statue targeted them. Shikamaru doubted they appeared like much of a threat. The statue threw multiple punches at them, only for Shikamaru's shadows to strike out, obliterating the 3 fists. Before they could take the opening, this provided another head shot, a torrential blast of water at them. They tried to dodge, but one of the wings was clipped and they went hurting towards the ground. Giant fists stopped their fall. One of Choji's clansmen nodded at Shikamaru. "I'll do my best to give you an opening," the man promised, increasing his size and spinning his large staff. With a booming yell, the man charged, managing to rally those around to follow him. They didn't flinch as they dodged attacks from 3 of the statue's hands. Ice ran down Shikamaru's spine when he realized who they were fighting for. They weren't fighting thinking they could win. They weren't fighting thinking he had a plan if only he could get past. They were fighting so that he could be with Naruto. He wasn't sure if it was from the memories that Naruto had shown everyone that tipped off the ninjas from other villages about their connection, or his own reaction to what had happened. He didn't care. He didn't care if he had to scrape, bleed, and possibly die. He was going to return to Naruto's side. The statue's colossal attack aimed in his direction again. The last of Naruto's cloak drained into his system. His shadow exploded out of him. 9 tentacles of darkness twisted and turned around him, blocking every strike aimed at his nearby comrades. He barely glanced at the second hand that came down to try to smash him. All shadow tails came together above his head, blocking the blow. His legs felt like jelly, but he pushed against his body's need for chakra. Instead, when the hand that attacked him tried to move back, he speared his shadow up into its palm. As it crumbled, he ran, his nightly tails fanning out, blocking debris and allowing him to vault over large boulders in his way. Shikamaru was able to get around the statue, with the help of the ninjas who were guarding him. He had reached a wall of rock created from a previous attack. Clawing up the cliff, he looked over his shoulder, seeing another incoming attack. Shikamaru, go! There was a crash as a large choji slammed into the side of the attacking appendage's wrist, forcing it away from Shikamaru. The rocks cut into his fingertips, a nail ripped off, and his knee slammed into a protruding stone, but finally, he pulled himself onto the shelf. His shadows dug into the ground, stopping him from falling back down. In the distance there was crashing of another fight, as well as large swaths of chakra. He couldn't recognize the chakra, but he did know it was someone familiar, one of the senseis. As he scrambled, he tried to sense Naruto's chakra. Still, he pushed forward. He tried not to think about what that meant, tried not to think about whether Naruto's body had already turned cold. He couldn't imagine such a warm, lively, affectionate person being. The ground started shaking violently, causing him to stumble and twist his ankle. He crouched, crawling to where he knew Minato was. Bloody fingers and shadow tails were the only things keeping him moving forward. The distance seemed insurmountable. He didn't even spare more than an annoyed glance at the asteroids that the enemy was about to hurl at them. Instead, he just kept staring ahead, wishing he could see that golden glow of the Nine Tails' power mixing with Naruto's. Instead, he saw a flash of purple. A number of the hurtling rocks were stopped. A lively, energetic chakra latched onto him, embracing him tightly. He lost his breath, but before he could think what that chakra meant, everything went black. He blinked, looking around. He was in Naruto's and his apartment. He wondered why he felt like he should be somewhere else. Where had he been only minutes before? Something important had happened, something horrifying? No, that couldn't be right, otherwise he wouldn't be relaxing, reading a book. He certainly wouldn't be sitting with feet in his lap. Following the legs attached to the feet, he found Naruto sitting on the other end of the couch, comfortably stretched out as she knitted a stag toy. Feeling his gaze, she looked up, smiling at him. Something the matter? No, not at all. Who's that for? Ai, do you think I should make 2? Naruto frowned down at the green stag. I could, and if she isn't carrying twins, I can hold on to the other till we need it. Asuma-sensei gave me the idea. Apparently Kiba gave him a dog toy for their baby, and I thought Ai and Eiji might like the symbol of the Naras. That's very sweet of you. Putting his book aside, Shikamaru began kneading Naruto's calf, watching her sigh contentedly. What time is it? 20-1. Let me finish this line, then we can get ready to meet your parents. What? He frowned at her in confusion. Had they been talking about his parents earlier? Did I forget to tell you? Naruto finished the line of knitting and put it aside. I went to your mom's yesterday to make cookies and she mentioned that Shikako has been craving barbecue all week. And if he doesn't get it soon, Yoshino is going to barbecue him instead. So, I suggested we all go for lunch today, to save your father's life. You made cookies? The Nara asked dubiously. Well, your mom made cookies, I ate them. Did you bring any home for me? Naruto grinned. I brought home some for me. I might give you one. With an equally wide smile, Shikamaru lunged forward, kissing her deeply. When he pulled back, Naruto gave him a cheeky look and held up one finger. Only one? He whined. There's still time to get more. Naruto stood up, yanking him to his feet. Come on, Yoshino and I made the booking for 1 o'clock and I'm hungry, so, let's go. Shikamaru stopped her before she could walk towards the door. I love you so much. I couldn't imagine losing you. Naruto kissed him sweetly. You're still only getting one cookie. Giving a grunt in response, he followed the woman out of their apartment to meet his parents.